So could everybody welcome Jack to the room?
Oh, yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's been so valuable to be in the room with you. And gosh, the energy is terrific. It's the progress that you've made, the list of all the things you've covered so far is just amazing. And as I already commented on the presentations about the accomplishments and the achievements in the beginning of the morning were just great. So I feel like I'm getting on the jam train that's well underway with tremendous momentum in this particular session. And I have a few thoughts prepared, but I want to start by just commenting on this question about why is it difficult? Why are certain conversations difficult? And to me, it's always risk. Personal risk, oh God, it's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be awkward. It might blow up. Somebody might scream at me. So personal risk. And then there's business risk, and all those statistics went up there about the cost of not having the conversations, letting problems go unaddressed because they're uncomfortable to talk about. So I think that's why there'll always be difficult conversations, and you'll know they're difficult because you'll worry about having them. If you're not the least bit concerned about having a conversation, it's not difficult. And another word that came up earlier in the conversation, I think someone mentioned that it takes courage. And that's why it takes courage, because you got to do something even though it's scary and it's not comfortable. But one thing that wasn't mentioned until the very end, Roy, you mentioned your friend that was such a great leader and who would always ask questions, can you help me understand what happened? It takes people skills plus courage, because without people skills, you won't get a great outcome. Oh, you'll address problems. You'll have the courage to do it, but you won't make things better. You could actually make things worse. Is that right? And that's why this is such a challenging topic. So somewhere on that slide, I believe there may be a fold over that gives you the 3 tips that I'm going to share in my 6 minutes of addressing just a couple of mini thoughts around this. But my basic overview is, as we get started on the 3 tips that I want to offer you, is that as a leader, your real challenge in difficult conversations, the reason we say lead the conversations is because you want to lead them to a positive outcome. You can't always do that, but that has to be the whole state of mind going in. And that's why it's a leadership challenge. So tip number 1, if you must criticize people, and this is often a part of difficult conversations, criticize respectfully. I mean, just imagine a performance improvement conversation that started like this. The manager says, Lauren, I believe in being completely honest. So I'm going to lay out this message to you in terms that are so simple, even you can understand them. And then the manager hands, yes, it's a bit of a gag, but the manager hands her a sheet of paper, and there are 7 things listed on there that are things that the manager says just drives him crazy about Lauren. And over the next few moments in the conversation, there's a minute or so spent on each one of these 7 things that the person is driving him crazy with their irritating behaviors at work. Well, by the time the manager gets to the end of the 7th one, Lauren has already figured out, man, I'm going to lose this job. I mean, the message, the body language, the tone is so clear that if I don't straighten this all up, I'm out. So naturally, looking out for herself, Lauren immediately starts thinking, not how can I get better, but how can I get out of here? And sure enough, 3 weeks later, she gets her notice. Expensive turnover costs fall on the company. The manager himself is right back to having to train somebody who's not ready to do the job up to stuff. And so I would call that a situation where the manager had the courage to have a difficult conversation, but did not have the people skills. So criticize respectfully would sound a little bit different, something like this. Hey, Lauren, if you have a minute, I've noticed the conversations with your people when you hear ideas that they bring to you on how to improve our service around here, I just sense that you're defensive. It's almost like, well, why should we change anything? And And yet I kind of feel like the thing I would look for in a leader like you is to encourage your people to bring you ways that we can improve our customer experience around here. What do you think? And create an opportunity for there to be a conversation there, even though there was criticism, but that criticism was done respectfully and gently and in the right tone of voice. Maybe another example, some of you may face this one day. Lauren, I've just got an observation to make. You know what I've noticed when we have team meetings is you've kind of fallen into a pattern of interrupting others. And I realize you don't necessarily do this on purpose, but as a person who wants people to collaborate with them and earn and deserve their respect, I'm just pretty sure that if you could hold off of talking over people and let them finish before you speak, that you'd be a lot more successful in your role as a leader. Thoughts? Well, now you're having conversations that will not necessarily cause people to quit or stomp off or holler at you. Still uncomfortable for you if you're not used to doing it. But the lesson I've learned is you can't antagonize people on the one hand and lead them in a positive way on the other hand. One's got to go. So the easy idea here is it's hard to criticize, but if you criticize respectfully, it's a lot more positive of a conversation and everybody feels a lot better about it. So is that tip up on my slide there, Roy?
It isn't, but it will be soon. Keep going, Jack.
Okay. All right. I just wanted people to be able to see these as I want you to be able to remember them. That's why I'm going to give you 3 tips. So second tip is don't just tell, ask. In fact, I'll ask you a question right now. And I want to see hands in answer to this, right? Did your mom ever tell you what to do? Hands? Whose mom ever told them what to do? Okay. Some unbelievable childhoods have been experienced by some of you that have never had your mother tell you what to do, but let's take it to work. How many of you have ever in any job had a supervisor tell you what to do? Yeah, sure. And then by the way, in the case of your mom, even though you heard her, did you ever fail to do what she said to do? And the case of the supervisor who told you exactly what he or she wanted you to do and how they wanted it done, did you maybe not completely comply with what you were told to do? And a lot of people, if you think about it, you didn't even feel bad about not doing what your mom told you to do or not doing what a manager told you to do. And the reason is because, you know what? You never committed to doing that. There was no discussion or agreement. You were just told what to do. And sometimes you just thought you had a better idea. So when we think about our own people that way, I'll give you an example. I do a lot of sales training and sales leadership. And a typical sales manager, if they're trying to get somebody to perform better, will say something like, Paul, you've got to make more calls. You've just got to make more calls. But a really good sales coach would say something like, so Paul, what do you suppose would happen if just somehow you were able to generate 10% more phone activity this week? And Paul mumbles a few things about how, that could have this or that positive impact. Well, I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right about that. So why don't we look at your calendar right now for the rest of the week, and let's see if we can't block off enough time that we can actually make that happen. How's that? Now that's an example of asking instead of telling makes the difference. See, telling is not teaching, but if you can ask people and get them involved in the conversation in an authentic way, then you're going to find that their engagement leads to their commitment, which frequently leads to an improvement in their performance. Another example could be maybe in an engineering situation. A manager might say to an engineer who demonstrates the software, might say something like, Tim, You need to ask better questions in those software demonstrations. But again, that's just telling. It would be maybe better to say, Tim, would you mind to play back that last recording from the demo you just did? Because I'd like to hear you kind of point out where you think you could have asked more effective questions and what would have made those questions more effective. And again, you've got an example here where a manager, an ordinary or stereotypical manager tells people what to do, but a coach actually helps people get better, and that starts with conversation. That's why the whole idea behind that tip is, don't just tell people what to do. Let the conversation start with asking them and getting them kind of involved in that. And then finally, the third tip that I think I have time to share with you, this is my favorite tip. Empathize like Ted. Ted being Ted Lasso. Now, I did some research and I happen to know that Ted Lasso is the #1 comedy in Australia. So I think a bunch of you will have seen this, but for those who haven't, let me just tell you that Ted Lasso is he's a football coach, but he's an American football coach, and he gets hired to go over to the UK and lead a struggling team, in one of those competitive leagues in English football. And he doesn't know anything about football. In fact, the woman who hired him was deliberately trying to make the team fail, and he was just going to be the fool that was stuck being the reason the team failed. Well, but what Ted surprises everybody with is, first of all, even though he's ignorant about English football, he is very, what's the word? He has a great attitude, a positive attitude. And he's also very good with people, and he just has a good nature. He's a good humored person, and everybody, even though they're making fun of him, everybody likes Ted Lasso. Well, so Ted takes his team, which by the way is called the AFC Richmond team, the made-up team in the UK, not to be confused with your Richmond team there in Australia that Jamie once took me to a game of Australian football. And so it's not that, but they have another similarity with this group. They have a star player, and on that team, his star player's name is Jamie, but he's an arrogant guy, and nothing like the Jamie that's in the room with you there now. I mean, this is a really arrogant star player, but so people put up with him, but he's unpleasant. And the made-up Jamie's name is Jamie Tart. So Ted Lasso wants to do some community service. He takes the whole team out to a retirement home just to, entertain and connect with some of the residents. And Jamie Tart is terrible at it. He thinks it's a waste of time. He's kind of misbehaving. He's not really doing the whole thing of making the Richmond team look good in front of the public. And so Ted Lasso calls Jamie off to the side and says, Jamie, he says, my grandmother used to drag me off to nursing homes to visit these old folks when I was a kid. I hated it. I just hated it. But then you know what? She taught me how to ask people questions about their lives. And you'd just be amazed how much people would tell you if you just listen. And sure enough, little by little, not instantly in 1 minute, but just little by little, Jamie makes a few connections and starts to enjoy the residents. They enjoy him, and he starts to change his attitude, not just towards this service day, but he starts to change his attitude toward his teammates that he's always felt so superior to. So to me, that was a great example of having a great outcome, and at the same time that you're having a kind of a challenging conversation. In another situation, Ted Lasso, by the way, in the middle of all this challenge with the team and their challenges, his marriage has fallen apart, and he knows it, and he has to put that personal problem aside all the time to pay attention to other people. And he notices that his equipment manager, who's a young fellow named Nate is just not performing very well. He's not giving much of himself. And that's because Nate is being bullied by a lot of the football players. And so he's full of frustrations and anger and just doesn't feel valued at all. And Ted comes over to him one morning as he's head down, walking around, and he says, Nate, look at me, listen to me. I see you. And Nate, I believe in you. I believe in you. So let's get out there today and just be our best selves today. And sure enough, little by little, with those words of kind of support and genuine empathy for Nate, he starts to perform a little bit better. He starts to give a little bit more. He starts to get a little more confident. And then on the side, by the way, Ted Lasso doesn't do this on purpose, but other people on his team pick up on his nature, and they take care of the bullied football players the way that only football players can do. So Nate ends up being a big success. So if you want to influence people positively during difficult conversations, then to recap the 3 tips, number 1, criticize respectfully. Number 2, don't just tell, ask. Start a conversation by asking. And then 3rd, your real leadership meta power is the empathy that Ted Lasso reveals in his character during that show on television. So empathize like Ted. And if you could do those 3 things just a little bit better this week, you'll see a big change in your challenges, and when you have to face them with difficult conversations, they'll come out better, you'll feel better, and the person you're talking to will feel better too.